Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Bubbles, the podcast about comics, anime, pop culture, and all that entails. I, of course, am Terry Williams, and the gentleman to my far left is Mr. Ben Dunn. How are you, sir?
Hello, everyone. Nice to be here.
And as you can tell, we have a stranger in our midst. This random stranger in the middle is Mr. Mark Walters we put on the Dallas Comic Show.
Dallas Comic Show, bigfanboy.com. Yeah, great to be here, Terry. Yeah,
cool. Yeah,
thanks
we'd
for
love to
inviting
have you
us.
on. Yeah, absolutely. Biggest reason I wanted to have you on is because coming up in April, you're having a show.
Yeah, April 20th and 21st, Dallas Comic Show Spring Spectacular. And yeah, Ben's going to be there. We're going to have a lot of really cool people coming, and I'm very excited about it. I've been working tirelessly. If you see bags under my eyes, I've earned those bags under my eyes. So,
Excuse me.
but yeah, no, it's shaping up to be a really fun show.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, Mark. I mean, for people who are not familiar with what you've done, within the local area as far as comics and geekdom is concerned.
Well, it's funny. Ben here is one of the first comic pros that I actually met in person. I didn't get into comics until I was in high school. I never collected comics as a kid, and when I got into it, it was like with a vengeance because I was having to make up for lost time. Because this would have been summer of 1990 when I got into comics.
What caused that change?
I was always an artist, and when I grew up as a kid, I was into like Mad Magazine, Crack Magazine, stuff like that. I love those things. But for whatever reason, I just never got into comics. And then the summer of 1990, I went into my first Lone Star Comics. I didn't even know there were comic book stores. And I went into my first Lone Star Comics and discovered all these books that I'd never seen before. And at the time, Lone Star Comics had a big section of quarter boxes. Mm-hmm. And it was just all their overstock. And this is also back when comics were $1, Yeah. So saying that you had quarter boxes wasn't as big of a deal as it is now. Yeah. But, I was going through those quarter boxes and I was kind of making up for lost time and getting all these runs of books that I didn't even know existed. And I was able to, within a month, I think I amassed 20 long boxes of comics.
Oh, wow.
Well, I was working
it can get out of control pretty fast.
I was working a full-time job going to high school, and I'm living at home with my mom, and so it was all my income was disposable. It was so I just started buying comics. And then I discovered that there were comic book shows. I discovered the Dallas Fantasy Fair at the time.
Oh, when was this?
1990.
1990.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
So I went to my first Dallas Fantasy Fair, which was in a hotel, and I met this guy because I had a couple of Ninja High School comics, and I got him signed, and he was super nice. And then that kind of opened another door for me because then I realized, you can actually go to these shows and meet the creators and get some FaceTime with them. And for me as a high school kid, it was like meeting any celebrity you could think of. Mm-hmm. It was like this really cool thing that I had opened the door to that I didn't know anything about. And within 6 months of that, I became a dealer. Within a year or two of that, I started working for the Dallas Fantasy Fair. And then within 3 years, I was Larry's number 2 in command,
Oh, wow.
So the guy that ran the show
impressive.
was a guy named Larry Langford.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I can honestly say everything I ever learned about running conventions, about how to deal with people, how to talk to people, I learned it from Larry Langford, for better or worse. Larry was an interesting guy.
Oh,
I
yes.
tried to cut out some of the less appealing qualities or whatever, but I did learn a lot from him on how to run conventions. And then I ran my first convention in the summer of 2000, and it went pretty well.
Oh.
So.
What made you decide to get into doing a comic book? That doesn't seem like something that most people would think about when they...
Well, oddly enough, it was the Dallas Fantasy Fair very sadly ended in the summer of 1996 because Larry was a great guy in a lot of ways, but he was bad with money. And he mismanaged his money, and the show ended up going under in the summer of 96. They had a big show plan. They had promoted it. This was pre-internet. Mm-hmm. So this was the only way you could promote a show was to put flyers out in stores and, word of mouth. And they had already promoted the show. And 2 weeks before the show, Larry said, well, we're going to have to cancel it because he owed a lot of money and there was no way he could pay it. And so there was a group of vendors that came together at that time and did kind of just a temporary makeup show. It was really small, and they brought me in to kind of salvage some of the guests because I had already been working with Larry. Oddly enough, everybody said, did you know the Fantasy Fair was going to fail? I was like, I had no idea. I was just as in the dark as everybody else. Mm-hmm. I found out 2 weeks before. I got a phone call from Larry, and he was like, well, Mark, the Fantasy Fair is no more. And I was like,
Wow.
really? And I couldn't believe it. So there was like a 3 to 4 year gap where there were no conventions in the Dallas area. And everybody that I knew, because I would go to San Diego Comic-Con every year, everybody I knew would come up to me and say, why don't you do a convention? You know all these people. You know how to do this. And so finally, in the summer of 2000, I was able to kind of pull it together, and I did my first show completely on my own, completely out of my own pocket, and I lost a ton of money, but I was persistent enough to keep it going because I knew that if I kept it going, eventually it would start making money. And by the time I got to my third show, I did start making a little bit of a profit.
So when was your first show?
May of 2000, followed immediately by August of 2000.
Wow.
And at that time, I was trying to do like 1 or 2 a year, and that was all I could handle. But then once the internet started to kind of kick in and you could use the internet for promotion, I realized that I could kind of up the frequency a little bit. I could do maybe 2 or 3 a year if I wanted to. That's the thing that nobody seems to think about when you think about these conventions. Like, I mean, Ben, you've been in this business long enough. You know, like San Diego Comic-Con started as like 100 people in a hotel room. You know,
yes.
I mean, there was nobody at the time. So shows have really exploded. But all of that happened like in the early to mid 90s. Like back when the Dallas Fantasy Fair was rising in popularity, it was the third largest show in the United States.
I remember, yes.
There were no Comic-Cons in all these cities. All of that happened like early 2000s. That's when all that explosion of conventions really happened. And a lot of that was due to Wizard, because Wizard was doing shows in like every major city in the United States. So other people were seeing this and they were thinking, oh, well, we need to create a show too. And that's why you have all these insane amounts of Comic-Con events that are going on everywhere.
Yeah, it's funny. Back to what you mentioned earlier with the didn't know comic book stores existed. I didn't either. I grew up in Durant, Oklahoma, and we had a couple of used bookstores, and then we had a newsstand downtown that got books in every week, which I found out, I can buy books every week. But my first experience in a comic book store, I was like, this is heaven.
Yeah.
What do I, or where do I start? It was just amazing. So I know you've had a huge history with the comic shows, that kind of thing. Take us from, say, 2000, your first show, to was it December? Or November?
December would have been the last one that we did.
Or that one that you did. As far as the differences, because I've noticed the difference when people say there's a con. It no longer means Comic-Con per se. It's just like a pop culture con or whatever. What have you noticed is the biggest difference, and where do you see it going?
Well, I guess the biggest difference, and Ben, I'm sure, can speak to this as well, is back when I first started doing these in early 90s, you didn't really talk about it. Like, it was kind of it was a weird little fringe hobby. Like when I got into anime, which was around the same time, early 1990s, you didn't talk about it.
No.
Nowadays, kids are going to school with Hello Kitty on their backpack. But back then, that was something you kind of kept it to yourself. Yep. And it was this weird sort of insular, like, I don't want to say like, exclusive club, but it was just, it just wasn't as widely recognized. Whereas now I think you go to conventions and you see families, you see, husbands and wives, you see a lot of different types of people that come to these things. Whereas back then you didn't see that.
Right.
And so I think the biggest change is just that it's more widely celebrated and widely accepted. And I love that. I mean, I think that's great, you know, that you can see, people of all walks of life coming to these things and taking it in. It doesn't matter what their age is. It doesn't matter what their background is. Everybody can find something that they enjoy. And I've seen a lot of people that come to these shows that maybe have never picked up a comic book before, and maybe they leave the show as a comic book fan. So that's cool, but you never used to see that. In fact, when I would go to the shows, you could talk to the creators, but you didn't really even have a lot of friends around you. Like you were just kind of among strangers, but everybody kind of was into the same thing. So I think that's really changed a lot, and in a very good way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What have you seen, Ben? I want to know, from a creator side, going to these shows, what's it been for you?
Well, I mean, it certainly has changed over the years. I mean, in the beginning, it was mostly comic-centric. It was mostly about people who loved comics, getting together, buying, trading, selling comics, and most of the people who came were comic creators, people who were in the industry. Same when anime conventions started coming up, they were mostly focused just on anime. Now I'm seeing more or less like since the big companies started taking, especially when Wizard World started to infiltrate into the comic book convention scene. It was no longer just a local thing. They were trying to go nationwide. I don't think. I mean, San Diego, even as big as it is, I've seen it grown from a small show into the massive thing it is. But now I notice it's more celebrity driven. Where
more corporate.
Yes, exactly. It seems like it seems more at least large corporate versions of conventions seem to be more focused on celebrity-driven, charging very high entrance fees, very high whatever fees. What I like about your shows is they're very intimate. They're very more creator-driven, more comic book-centric. You have your celebrities, of course, but they're not the main focus all the time. And so, your conventions are very, very what I call a classic version of a comic book convention.
Yeah, I'm trying to do a show that was like the shows I fell in love with, like when I first got into this. Like I'm trying to sort of recapture that magic a little bit. And it's not always easy because, there are a lot of people out there that they get used to that corporate big box show and they just think, I'm just going to go to only that type of show. But the thing that I find, and I think you probably have experienced this too, a lot of people that do come to our show that maybe have never done it before, they're like, oh, wow, this is kind of, like you said, it's intimate, it's fun, it's quaint, it's got a really warm quality to it.
People know each other, they buy, sell, and trade.
You can get stuff done. You don't feel like you have to leave without, I didn't meet this person or this person. Like, you can meet everybody you want to meet. You can get what you know.
And some of those big shows, you're spending $100 just to get in.
Yeah. And in parking and all that. And with yours, it's always at a great location. And you always have, even though it's intimate, there's still some really great guests. November, Joe Jusko was there. And that was, for me, it was really good. And I still, Ben won't remember this at all. But so for me, the first comic book creator I ever met was Ben.
Is that right?
And it wasn't at a convention. It was at the Plano Trade Days. He was at a friend of mine, Gabriel Gira, had his booth. I said, Gabe.
Yeah.
And he said, hey, you have any Ninja High School stuff? I said, yeah, I've got some. He said, oh, well, Ben Dunn is here. I'm going to bring him over. And I'm like, he's here?
Yeah.
And I'm already fanboying out because I'm like, this is my first ever comic creator. Why is he walking around here? What's he doing? And so it was really cool. In meeting him, he was just a guy.
Yeah.
And now throughout, doing this now since then and meeting more and more people and becoming, where it's almost one of those things now where we come to a show, or at least I come at a show, one of your shows, and outside of the big guests, I know almost everybody there. And it's like this kind of the mini reunion. Hey, how you doing? How's it been going? This kind of thing.
Yeah.
But still, when you got to meet Mr. Jusko, he could spend 5 minutes talking with me uninterrupted because there's not that line of
and he loved that.
Yeah.
In fact, he kept telling me after it was over, he was just gushing about, he said, man, I had so much fun. Like when I go to these shows, usually I'm killing myself just trying to get through the day. Mm-hmm. And he said, but at your show, I had a lot of fun. I think he made some coin, and he just enjoyed himself. Yep. And so I think that's one of it's funny, like this next show coming up, we got Mark Brooks coming back. And the last time I had Mark Brooks, which I think was almost exactly 2 years ago, I remember he told me, I probably shouldn't say this, but he told me, he said, I made more money at your show than I made at New York Comic Con. And I was like, really? And he said, yeah. But then you start to think about it, and you think about how time consuming and how stressful it is for them to go to those types of shows. Mm-hmm. Whereas when they come to my show, they get to be the star and they get to just sit there and meet the fans and make the money, and it's more relaxing. Yep. And at the end of the day, it's like, oh, wow, I actually did pretty well. I made some pretty good money here. And so, that to me is that's why I do it. Yep. I've been on the corporate side of it. Mm-hmm. I've seen that side of it. And, there is a lot of money changing hands there. But that's not of interest to me. I just want to do a show that's like the shows that I first started going to, that I fell in love with, meeting Ben at that first Dallas Fantasy Fair. I want everybody to have that experience. Yeah. Not just with Ben. Yeah. But Ben is a great guy to talk to.
Exactly.
But be able to walk in, meet the creator that you want to meet, not have to wait in line all day, not have to pay a fortune to get in the door and, for parking and all that. And then when you go home, you might still have a little money in your pocket because you didn't break the bank. That's and buy some cool stuff, from great vendors.
Yeah. Which at your show, I've noticed, I see people, because at a lot of the bigger shows, I was at Fan Expo in New Orleans, and I saw a lot of people, but I saw them once.
Yeah.
Whereas at your show, I'll see somebody Saturday and they have time to go look at everybody else. Then they'll come back Sunday and like, oh, hey, I got home and I was looking, I need this. They were able to come back. It's affordable for them to come back. And they brought something else for, oh, I had this book I wanted to get signed by Mr. Jusco, or do you have this? And it's really available.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the big advantages for a show like this, is because there used to be these conventions were ways for you to network with other fans, meet new people who shared your same interests. On these big shows, you're just in and out of there.
Yep.
You don't really spend the time to get to know other people, your fellow fans. You get, like you said, talk one-on-one to a creator, and spend some quality time with them, and who knows where that might lead to, because used to be conventions were events. People would save up for a whole year just to go to a convention.
Yeah, when we were doing the Dallas Fantasy Fair at the time, there wasn't anything else to go to. Like, if you lived in the Texas area, that was it.
Yeah.
And so Ben's right. They would save up. It was a yearly event. It's like, I'm going to save my money, and I know I'm going to be there every year. And then when it went away, I think people were kind of lost there for a bit. And there was a couple of conventions that tried, like when the Fantasy Fair went under, there was a couple of conventions that tried to do things, but they just, if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't know how to run a convention, you shouldn't try to run a convention. Right. Because I have seen so many people start a convention and it fails and then they never do it again. And I was facing, even in 2000, when I started putting out flyers in shops, I will never forget, I went to Titan Comics, which is just around the corner from here. I went to Titan Comics, I put some flyers out on the counter, and I was looking around the store. 30 seconds after I put the flyers out, some guy walked in, picked it up, and said, "Is this really going to happen?" That was what I was facing at the time, because there were a lot of failed attempts at other conventions, and these people didn't know who I was. And but thankfully, I had a relationship with a lot of these local retailers because I'd been going into their shops for years. I had been dropping off flyers for the Dallas Fantasy Fair. They all knew me. So they were able to also kind of talk it up and say, no, the guy that runs this, he knows what he's doing. He's been in the business a while. He knows everybody. It's going to happen. Yeah. And that helped. But that was the kind of stuff you had to deal with at the time. And of course, now with the internet and everybody's doing a convention and everybody's promoting it on social media, it's even harder to compete with some of those other guys because nobody really knows, like, is this a good show? Is this not? I still get emails for people that think that, like, I'm another show. Like, they'll just see my show and they'll assume, oh, you're that show that's coming up in June. And I'm like, no, that's not me. And I have to explain to them, we're not all the same. Like you have to learn the differentiation between each show and find a show. I always tell people, I say, find a show that's comfortable for you. Like, there's a lot of shows out there to go to. Yeah. But find one that kind of fits your speed and then just make that your regular show. Yeah.
Which, as a vendor, I guess I'm kind of float on both sides. I'm a fan first and foremost. I'm a fan and all that, but I'm also a vendor. And for me, when I go through my list at the beginning of the year and find the shows I'm going to do that year, it's kind of, okay, I know Mark's show's good. I'm going to do that. And kind of, hey, put me down for your show. I'm going to be there. But before that, it was like a lot of phone calls, a lot of research. Is this a good show? What's the crowd like? What's it like as far as a vendor? Because I can't say, hey, I'm going to go to North Carolina and get a room for 3 nights and pay $500 for a booth and not make any money. So I kind of want to know what I'm into. And with yours, it's that knowledge of it's going to be a good show. We know kind of good is the wrong word. We know what to expect.
Yeah.
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 Absolutely. Yes. So over the years, what have you seen comic book wise or pop culture wise that has changed while you're doing
I love this about Ben because he always asks these questions. I love looking at his Facebook page because every day he posts like 2 or 3 questions that are really interesting questions, You
have to think about it.
What have I seen change, like, as far as like the fan
to what is now? I mean, as far as just the general perception of the way that people are coming to conventions now. I mean, are they just used to going to those big, huge shows, or they don't even realize that there's still small, intimate shows that can still be very intimate, be very personal?
Yeah, I mean, I think, listen, it's a constant battle to try to win people over. And like, I had a guy, and I've tried to teach myself over the years to not let this bug me, but we have reviews on our Facebook page where people can review the show. And most of our reviews, I would say, 98% of them are very positive, glowing reviews. Everybody has a great time. They love the show. They can't wait to come back. There's always that one or two of these guys that'll post a review and they'll say kind of hurtful, negative things. But you can kind of read between the lines and you realize, oh, they're used to going to the big box corporate shows. And so when they came to this, they thought, oh, well, this isn't as big and grand as that other show is. But at the same time, it's I want so badly to say, well, yeah, but you didn't pay. You barely paid anything to get in.
Right.
You parked for free. You could meet every single person that was there. I mean, I want to point out all those things, but, you kind of got to let that go. I would say the biggest thing I've seen change is when I was into it in the 90s, I think that it was a bigger reader market, whereas now I think it's a bigger speculator market. I think people are buying books because they think, oh, this is going to, 10 years from now, it's going to be worth a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And we did see some of that in the 90s. There was the whole speculator boom where people were buying up, when Death of Superman came out, people were buying it up saying, I'm going to retire off of this. And now, those books are worthless, Although there is an interesting trend now of 90s books are starting to have a comeback.
Mm-hmm. I know,
There's
right?
this interesting nostalgia because all the people like us that when I was a teenager buying those books growing up, now we're all adults and we want to recapture that nostalgia. So the 90s stuff is starting to see a resurgence. But yeah, there is a problem, I think, with modern comics that it seems like they've kind of lost the finger on the pulse of what makes a great comic.
Well,
and
they're
what
not
makes
really,
people want to come back to it.
Yeah. Well, they're not really fostering the next generation of readers.
Yeah. And I know something that you and I agree on greatly because I think you just posted this a day or so ago. I have people ask me all the time, they're like, if you could take over Marvel or DC, how would you fix it?
Yeah.
And I have been saying this for decades. Cut out all these extra, we don't need 12 Batman titles a month. We don't need 8 Spider-Man titles a month. Just make it one core title for each major character and just really good stories, great writers, great artists.
Get the best talent
Get the best talent on those books and trim the fat is what they need to do. Because that's one of the biggest problems that they have. It is interesting because you were just talking on one of your previous shows about Ultimate Spider-Man and how well that's doing. And but what's really funny is when you get to the core of it, it's a very basic Spider-Man story.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what people want. The Spider-Verse stuff is cool, but it's too much. It's too much to keep up with. And I think people are kind of just give me a basic Spider-Man story that I can read and enjoy. It's a proven tactic.
Yeah.
And they seem to have kind of strayed from that. So
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree because with me, with the X-Men, I love the X-Men, loved them. But then there became the point where there was Uncanny, there was New X-Men, All New X-Men, Extreme X-Men, Astonishing X-Men. And I'm they made it so there would be this huge crossover every year and I would end up having to buy every book in the Marvel Universe just to know what's happening in the key title that I want to read. And it's just too exhausting. And as opposed to when I was a kid, like you in high school in the 80s, and saying, oh, books are 65 cents or 60 cents. Now they're $4.99, $3.99, $5.99, $7.99 on some of the deluxe editions.
yeah.
Even though I'm working older guy, I'm still not going to spend that money. So when I think about if my grandson says, hey, Grandpa, I want to buy some comics, I'm be cool, let's go buy some comics. But after he gets a stack of 10, I'm like, crap, that's $100.
Yeah.
And it's daunting.
The entry point is too
So if
high.
they would make them, like you've mentioned a couple of times, make it, more disposable, like a cheaper paper maybe. I mean, you can still keep the same quality, the same art, it's all still there. It doesn't have to be on the cardstock and all that, I don't think.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, one of the things I had thought about, I talked to some people about this, is that Marvel and DC, they have 80 years of history, almost 100 years of history, and all those times they've been publishing new books. Why don't they just take old material, put a new cover on it, sell it for $1?
Well, it's funny you say that because one of the most popular, I talk to a lot of the local retailers, the comic shop owners, and one of the most popular things they sell right now are those facsimile editions.
Really?
Because every time they put out a facsimile edition of, and for people that are listening, if you don't know what that means, it's like a complete copy of an original, like if you took a Detective Comics, number 38 or Action Comics number 38, Action Comics number 1. I'm sorry, I'm getting my books mixed up in my head. Action Comics number 1, and you reprint it, but it's exact. It has all the original ads. It has everything. So it looks exactly like the original comic, but it's $5. and people are buying those like crazy.
Yeah.
And that ought to tell you something. It's like, these are books that have been out there for 50, 60, 70 years, but people are still buying them. And why is that? Because they love those stories. They love those characters. And there's something about that book that really speaks to them. Whereas the new books, they're struggling to sell it. And I don't want to sound like I'm bashing Marvel and DC, because I'm not. I listen.
They are the industry leaders.
They are, and I still buy comics every week. I go into the comic shop. I buy comics every week.
Yep.
So I'm not bashing them, but there is a problem, and there is something that needs to be fixed. And I don't think it's doomed. Like, I don't think that's beyond fixing. But somebody's got to get in there and right the ship. And I don't know when it's going to happen, but...
Well, I think the change came when they were bought by huge corporations.
Yeah.
I mean, before, Marvel and DC were all independent companies on their own.
Yeah.
And they had to live and survive based on what they produced. They couldn't afford to produce, umpteen million X-Men titles, or they can only focus on the titles that they had. Mm-hmm. Once they were bought by Disney, once they were bought by Warner Brothers, my belief is that once they had a lifeline to staying alive, they didn't have to worry about that anymore.
Yeah.
They could just do whatever they want because they knew that Big Daddy
Now it's an IP farm. Yeah. It's like they're just creating IPs. So like, hey, can we make a TV show out of this or a movie out of this? And it's starting to become really obvious when you see some of this stuff, because it's like, oh, well, that doesn't look like a comic book. That looks like a pitch for a movie.
Yes.
And so, yeah, it's like you got to ask yourself, why are you doing this? Are you doing this because you really want to create a good story? Or are you doing this because you're just looking for the next Disney Plus series?
Right. And I'm really hoping that's what they notice with how well the revamp of the Ultimate Universe is doing. Because I have read Ultimate X-Men, Ultimate Black Panther, and Ultimate Spider-Man, and all three of those seem like they have a really good core story.
Yeah.
Like they've devoted themselves again to what a comic ought to be.
Yeah.
I hope.
Well,
we'll see.
The only problem is with that whether they can sustain that.
Yeah, I know.
When you have a new issue out, it's always right out the gate. It's whether or not they can finish the marathon.
Yeah.
And so it would be important to them to maintain that level of quality and consistency for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. It's a long-term game. If you don't nurture it, you don't support it, it's eventually people are going to get,
Well, it's easy to understand why you're seeing a rise in things like crowdfunding, like people that are crowdfunding their own comic books. And Ben has certainly had his experience with that. And I think one of the reasons that people are getting so invested in that is because they feel like it's more of an event. Like I'm part of something now. Like I'm helping to fund this book. I'm having a say in whether or not this is successful. Whereas the comics that come out on the shelves, like they have no input on that. Right. Like the creators that are behind those comics will probably never see them or talk to them. But the people that are crowdfunding their own comic books, like you could have a dialogue with those people. You could have some input. You can comment on their crowdfund pages. And when you get that package in the mail, it feels like more of an event, and so I've seen some of the stuff that Ben is doing with that, and I think it's really impressive because, not all crowdfund stuff is great. There's a lot of crap out there.
Yeah.
You got to sift through it,
but
there are some really interesting things that are happening out there, and so I don't know, and maybe I kind of wonder, is Marvel and DC, are they taking note of this? Are they looking at that? Are they paying attention to it?
I honestly think they don't care.
They probably don't.
Yeah, be honest. If they wanted to do crowdfunding, they could do it.
Yeah.
They don't really, it doesn't matter to them.
Well, going back to what you were saying just a second ago about because these are such big corporations that own these companies now, people don't realize they could just stop doing comics tomorrow and it wouldn't matter to them because that's not their bread and butter. They don't make all their money off. They make their money off of TVs, movies, and things like that, action figures, merchandising. Comics is such a low return for them right now that either one of those companies could just say tomorrow, no more comics.
I would almost think that they're looking at this more like a promotional arm of their
it's an advertising wing.
It's an advertising wing. Yeah.
It's
It's basically advertising money.
Yeah. And in which case you can make some money back on your advertising.
Yeah.
But again, I want to reiterate this because I hear so much out there. I am not hating on Marvel and DC because
I love Marvel and DC.
I still buy their books. Yep. I'm a diehard comic fan. I'm a Wednesday warrior, and so I don't want to be yet another guy out there that's saying Marvel and DC sucks. Comics are dead. I don't want anybody thinking that that's where I'm coming from, because I'm not. I don't like the people that are out there saying that. I think there is still hope. It's just a matter of figuring out what is the right direction to take.
And and like I said, they have 80 plus years of history, so they've got plenty of comics that you can buy back issue wise that you can get into.
Yeah,
and honestly, you can buy most of those for the less than the cover price of a new comic.
Yeah.
That's what's crazy. It's you take a loss. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So another question about the shows that you do, and this is something that I am interested in. So your guest list is always, man, I've been going to your show now as a vendor a couple of times, not a lot. I've known you, I guess, almost a year now.
Yeah.
But you seem to know kind of everybody, or most people.
I've always wondered about that.
So how do you get these guests? Is it because you have a previous relationship? Is it just you reach out because you're a nice guy? What's going on?
Is there like a website you can go to?
Yeah. Book a vendor, bookaguest.com or something. It's this.
Honestly, a lot of it is kind of what you said. Like, I've been doing this for so long. I've developed these relationships with people. A lot of people are very good friends. Joe Jusko and I are very good friends. Mark Brooks and I are very good friends. And that does benefit me because I think there's a lot of those people like that if just some random guy that was putting on a convention wanted to book them, they'd have to jump through a lot more hoops than I do. Mm-hmm. So there is an advantage there. But I also, because I've spent so much time and effort developing and cultivating those friendships, I don't want to do those guys wrong. So, if I invite them to come in, I want them to do well. Mm-hmm. I want them to have a good time so that they'll come back. And so, yes, it is friendship, and that helps. But it's also me as a promoter trying to figure out, okay, how do I make this the best possible show it can be for them,
right,
so that they'll want to come back and do it again. And, sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't, But I've been really lucky because a lot of the people that I've met in the industry, I have become friends with, sometimes very accidentally. It just, I don't know, maybe it is partly my personality. I don't know. I was lucky enough to get to know Bernie Wrightson really well. Bernie was like a second father to me. He was like a brother to me. He was like family. Mm-hmm. He actually, one of his very last shows that he ever attended was my show. And it was at a time when his health was really declining, but he told me even then, he said, I told you I would be there. I'm going to be there. So I felt really lucky in that sense that I got to, have him. And I've had so many of these great people come to the show, but I guess it is friendships. I mean, I don't know. Ben, why do you keep coming back to my show?
Because I love you,
okay,
man.
Well, there you go. Yeah, he likes. But
I also have, like you said, I have a great time.
Yeah.
I do well. I got to meet people, and my philosophy is that anytime a local show wants to have me, I'll be there, man.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and maintaining those relationships too, because that's the other thing. Like, Ben and I see each other a lot, but there's some people like Carrie Gamble was at my last show. I see Carrie maybe once or twice a year. Carrie's kind of getting into that hermit phase where he doesn't come out very much anymore. But when he came to that last show, he was rocking and rolling, man. He had like a line the whole time, like he was doing really well. He even told me at the end, he's like, man, I think this is the best show I've ever had. And I'm like, yeah, see what happens when you actually come to the show and stay for 2 days,
Yeah.
But, so yeah, it's just cultivating and maintaining those relationships. And I mean, but part of that comes from the fact that these guys are heroes to me.
Yeah.
Like, I love these guys. Yeah. I love them for what they do.
And I think they realize that.
Yeah.
So when they come to this,
I'm a fan.
They're not just some part of a larger, machine.
Yeah.
They know that if they have a problem, they can come to you and you'll take care of it. If there's something that's going on, you'll take care of it. It's not like where they go to like a huge show and there's like, who do I talk to,
Well, it's funny, like James O'Barr, the creator of The Crow, he told me once, or I don't even think he told me, I think I just saw him tell somebody else, or he posted it online. He said, I like going to Mark's show because Mark treats us like rock stars. And I always kind of thought, I do? Like, because I don't feel like I treat you like rock stars. But then I started to realize how badly these guys get treated at other shows. Mm-hmm. Like Larry Hama posted a really interesting thing a couple of years ago about how he went to a show and all he wanted to do was go in the green room to get a cup of coffee. And they said, "Oh, you're not allowed in here," because they're like, "This is a celebrity green room." And he said, "I'll never go to that show again."
Yeah.
Because it ruined his experience, and it ruined it enough to where it kind of soured him on going to shows for a bit.
When other creators see that,
Yeah.
That turns them off too as well.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things where I've noticed, because I was fortunate enough to have a really good friend and basically like a father to me that owned the LCS in Denison, where I was at, Box Seat Sports Cards. Doug Coleman owned it, and him and his wife Joyce were like family to me.
Mm-hmm.
And he would always have, he did sports cards and comics, but he would always have, I used to always joke with him that he knew everybody. Everybody liked him. He knew everybody, because he would have people who would not do anything for anyone else, like reclusive cowboys, like Rayfield Wright, and all these old retired stars would come up and do a show just for him.
Yeah.
Just come to his store or go out to the lake and do a signing for him, and would sign all day long and talk to everybody and be great and leave feeling happy. And that's kind of what you do with people as well, even with the vendors. From the vendors that I know, and I know almost all of them at your shows now, we all have the same thing. We know we're going to be taken care of. If I have an issue, I ask you. If I need, have to leave early, let you know, hey, this is happening. Can I get out of here? Sure, let's work it out. Whatever it is, you accommodate.
Yeah.
Within reason, of course.
Right.
Which makes us want to come back. That's why I've said, whenever you have a show, put me down, I'll be there.
Right. No one wants to have a bad experience.
Yeah, right. And that shows but I think that also shows it starts with you, and then Ben's happy. He's signing, talking, doing his thing. I'm happy as a vendor.
Let other people know.
Yeah. I'm happy as a vendor. And next, you see people, like little groups of people just getting together, talking, hanging out. And it's this little party.
Yeah.
That's all because it started with you putting it together.
Well, I think one of the answers to that question is, if there's one thing I've learned in doing this for 34 years, this is a really small community. Mm-hmm. Everybody talks to one another about their experiences. And so if you treat someone badly, or if you handle something in a very unprofessional way, everyone's going to find out about it. And so, I talk to a lot of people, not gossiping, but I do try to find out, if there is something that happens at another show that doesn't go well, I want to know, because I don't want that to happen at my show. Right. I want people to, leave there happy, and that's across the board. That's the fans, that's the vendors, that's the guests, my staff. I want everybody to walk out of there happy, because I want them to come back.
Right.
Absolutely.
And, so that's, again, it's about cultivating those relationships and trying to keep everybody happy. And sometimes it ain't easy keeping everybody happy.
Yeah, of course not.
But you got to try at least. And it is amazing to me how there was an incident that just happened recently at, I don't want to name the show, but it's a show in Florida, where there was a big whoop to do with AI, and it blew up and it got really ugly. And part of the reason it got ugly was because one of the top staff guys was commenting on social media and basically being really abrasive and rude, and everybody saw it. And now it did so much damage to that show.
Yep.
And that's the kind of thing that can really hurt for years. So you always want to be careful about that, and you always want to try to address those needs, and don't ever talk down to the customer. If you see someone that's upset, figure out a way to make them not upset.
That is such a good rule. I wish more people would.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've literally had people, if someone, it's rare, but if someone did get upset about something, I try to figure out, well, what can I do to make this person happy? Right. And when they leave, even if it means offering them a ticket to the next show or something, but what can I do to where they're not walking out of here upset?
Right, make it right.
Yeah. And so, and then there are some people that it doesn't matter what you do, they're never going to be happy.
Right. But the normal person, which we understand things happen. Sometimes things happen that are out of your control.
Sure.
It's hey, sorry,
the worst thing, anything that can happen is you ignore them.
Exactly.
Okay, or you berate them, or you insult them.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing that you can do.
Yeah, I did have a guy one time, this was years ago when we were doing Dallas Comic-Con in Plano, And there was a guy that was really upset, and I came up to the front, and he was berating one of our registration people, and he was like screaming at him. And so I tried to stop him, and I tried to talk to him, and it was like everything I said, he just kept screaming. And finally, I just started screaming back. I said, "Well, I guess nothing I say is going to make you happy, is it?" And he goes, "No, probably not." And I said, "Okay, goodbye." And he left. But I felt terrible.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was like you do have to recognize when you reach those people that you're not going to get through to them or whatever. But I always try to do something that will make them happy and that they'll leave feeling satisfied.
Right.
And I've had some people that I did that with that I really thought, like, I'm never going to see that guy again. And then, like, the next show, he shows up and says, "Hey, man, I really appreciate you, like, taking care of me the last time. And, I really enjoyed myself this time." And that's a great feeling. That's a great feeling.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you something.
Sure.
Speaking of celebrities, how in the world did you get Chuck Norris to come to your show?
Luck. A lot of it was luck. Chuck has, first of all, he has a home here. He has a home in Dallas, as well as other places. And he's not always here. So some of that is timing, because if he wasn't here at the time, if I had to bring him in from out of town, I don't think I could have done it, because he kind of travels with an entourage. And so thankfully, like, he was in town. The first time I had him, I don't mind telling the story, but it was a very desperate situation, because I had booked Cary Hiroyuki Tagawa from Mortal Kombat and several other great movies and TV shows. One of my favorite character actors. He's a terrific actor, and I was super excited about having him. Well, the day before the show, the day before setup, he canceled. It was kind of a health thing. He couldn't make it, and he was my headliner as far as media guests go. And I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I just lost my headliner. And I knew that Chuck was in town, and the agent that I booked Cary through was also Chuck's agent. So I called him up. I called him up and I said, "Hey man, listen, I know you're doing a signing with Chuck. I know he's in town. Can you please call in a favor for me and just see if he'll come out and just do one day?" And so the agent and I even gave him like a script to read and say, "Tell him this, tell him exactly this." And so he went to Chuck with that, and that's basically how we got Chuck the first time. Now, Chuck had a great time. He was happy with how everything went. I've been at shows that Chuck was at where things did not go well, so we made sure he left happy. And then the next time, when we reached out to him, he immediately said yes. And it was like, wow, okay. So now I've had him twice. And the funny thing was, normally Chuck only does one day, and he only does like 4 hours. The second time we had him, he did 2 full days, and he even stayed late. And I was like, wow, okay, I guess I'm doing something right.
That is amazing.
So again, it's cultivating those relationships. It's like you just keep them happy, and hopefully they'll come back.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And Chuck's now doing movies again. Did you see that?
Right? That's
he's in his 80s, and he's out. He says, "I'm out of retirement."
If Arnold can do it,
I know. Yeah.
Chuck can do what he wants to do. No one's going to tell Chuck now.
Exactly.
That's why Superman wears his underwear on the outside.
That's right.
Exactly. So the show is. Let us know about the show that's coming up. I want you to let everyone know when it is.
Sure.
The guests, times, all that kind of stuff.
Okay, well, so the next Dallas Comic Show is April 20th and 21st. You can find out all the information at DallasComicShow.com. We're on every social media platform. I think it's just at Dallas Comic Show on pretty much everything, except, no, that's right. Yeah, it's every Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that. It's just at Dallas Comic Show. And it's we've got a really amazing list of comic talent. As I said, Ben will be there, of course. He's at almost every show, but I love having him there because he's always got something new out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, this guy's like one of the hardest working guys in comics.
It's crazy, yeah.
And I know that about him. I know that he'll always have something new to promote, and I love that. Because there's some guys that come and they're like, they're just promoting the same book they did 20 years ago, and it's like, oh, he's got new stuff. So Andy Lanning is coming in from the UK. Andy, of course, is known he kind of was instrumental in revamping the Guardians of the Galaxy, what would become the movie versions of Guardians of the Galaxy. And I don't think he's ever been here before. I think this is his first time doing a show here.
Well, welcome to Texas.
Yeah, welcome to Texas.
that accent, Texas.
Mark Brooks is coming back, and he's just killing it right now.
He's got tons of covers out this month.
He has over 30 covers on the shelves just this
insane.
month.
Wow.
I don't know.
Amazing.
Busy.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
A lot of really great. I mean, Ariel Diaz is, of course, killing it with
Yes.
she's doing a lot of really cool covers. She's coming back. Nick Patara. I don't know if you had a chance to see his crowdfunded book,
No, I
Axe
haven't.
Wielder John.
I have
Oh
not.
my God, it's amazing. Talking about crowdfunding, that was a real successful campaign too. And then on the media side of things, we've got Yancey Butler, who's known for Witchblade. We've got David Preval, who was in Mean Streets and The Sopranos. I like bringing in these character actors because, that's the thing that I think Ben and I have talked about that too. Like, I'm real big into character actors. So I love seeing people like that at shows because, the A-listers are cool, but, I like seeing the guy that you can say, oh, man, that guy's in everything.
Yeah, I know him from this, and I know.
I recognize him.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, one of the guests I'm most excited about, and it's something I've been working on for well over a year, is Muriel. I don't want to mispronounce her name. I think it's Farion. But she is the creator and designer of Strawberry Shortcake and the Care Bears.
Wow.
And she's coming in. This is the first time she's ever done a show in Dallas.
Wow.
And I'm super excited to have her. And I can't imagine, she's got to have just amazing stories to tell.
I bet.
So yeah, she's going to be coming in for that, and very excited about that. So it's a great list. And again, we've got wonderful vendors coming in. I always tell people, because it's funny to me how a lot of times you go to some of these shows and there's not a lot of comic vendors. And I feel like we've got a great mix of comic vendors.
You
do.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is a comic show. We're the vendors.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah. Or you'll see one or two comic vendors. I'll never forget. I guess I can trash talk them a little bit because they don't really exist anymore. But the Wizard shows, when they did the Wizard show down in Austin, the last time I went, which was not long ago, it was called Austin Comic Con. That's what they called it. And there were 2 comic vendors in the entire room.
Wow.
And it was a huge room. And I was like, how do you only have 2 comic vendors?
And call it a Comic Con.
Yeah. I mean,
Call
I
it just a
couldn't
con.
believe that.
Austin Con. Yeah.
That's a misleading advertising right there.
Yeah. And neither one of those guys had new books. They were all old school comic vendors. So I was actually looking for a couple of new books that had just come out, and they were like, no, we don't carry that. And I was like, ugh. So I'm glad that we have the guys that we have, because I think we have a really good mix.
Yeah. So what's the location for this one?
It's at the Vista Mall, which is in Louisville. It used to be called Vista Ridge Mall, and it's gone through a couple of name changes, but it's right off of Hebron Parkway and 35, real close to 121 in that area. Real easy to get to. Parking is free. Tons of parking. Yeah. And you can't miss us because we are in the center court of the mall.
Yep.
Right when you walk in, if you just look for the center court, we're on the lower level. We're right underneath the escalators. And we just recently started using that spot. And I'm really happy with it because it's visual wise, it's great because you can't miss it.
Yep.
The previous spot that we used, which was an old Victoria's Secret, I like that spot, but you had to kind of guide people to it. Whereas this one, it's you walk in and you can't miss it. Yeah, it's just right there.
Yeah.
So
it's always a fun time. Definitely.
And admission's cheap, super cheap admission. Kids 12 and under get in free with paid adult. I mean, we try to make it easy for families. So bring the whole family out, invite your friends. There's a lot of cool stuff. We got a really cool VIP package that's super cheap. So again, we just try to keep it affordable and easy, and we want people to come out and just enjoy themselves and not break the bank. They can walk out of there with a little money in their pocket.
Well, it's definitely working, because I know that there's a lot of vendors that I know that are saying they want to reach out to you, but I know you've got pretty much a list of people wanting to reach out to you now, which is good.
Well,
that's a good thing to have.
I'll let you in on a little secret. I guess I can talk about it now because it's not going to happen. But there was a period for a month or so ago where what used to be the JCPenney in the mall, I was going to get that.
Ooh.
And it's enormous. I mean, it's more space than I could ever need. but I think that somebody rented the space, and so it's probably not going to happen. But I like where I am because where I am, like I said, it's real easy to find when you walk in the mall. So yeah, it is a little limited as far as vendor space goes, but I'm also really happy with our current list of vendors. I think we got great vendors there.
Oh, do you have aspirations of actually growing way beyond this?
Man, I'm getting old, Ben. I'm getting old, and it's getting harder and harder to do this.
Oh, well,
and so,
I understand.
So I like having a show that is manageable, and I like having a show that isn't like, I don't want to have a show that's so big to where if people wanted to stop me and ask me a question, they couldn't find me.
Right.
You know, I want to be available. I want to be present. And so I feel like I have a show that is like kind of just the right size, you know, for what I want. Yeah. I want it to be intimate. I want it to be fun. And that extends to myself. You know, like I want to have fun when I'm there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. What's the point of doing it if you're not having a good time?
You know, it's funny. At the last show, I got a killer Godzilla sketch from Ben. And I was thinking to myself, it's like, how many times have I had Ben at shows and I never get a sketch from him? And it was funny because
I was waiting for that day.
I had actually asked him at the previous show, but I forgot to go back and follow up on it. And then he delivered it at the last show, and I was so happy with it. And but that's the thing. It's like sometimes you get tied up with stuff and you forget to do those things.
Absolutely.
So I want to try to be like more proactive on like treating myself a little bit while I'm at those shows. Yeah.
We certainly appreciate you coming out and joining us today. We're about out of time, but I want to say thank you to everybody watching. Come out and see us. All three of us will be at Dallas Comic Show. Come and see us. But first, please go like, subscribe. Tell us what you think, what you dislike, what you like. Reach out to Mark if you have any questions, if you have any concerns. Follow us we're everywhere. We're on YouTube, of course. We're also on Spotify, iTunes. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. We're all over. Just reach out, Beyond the Bubbles. Find us, like, subscribe. Ben, let them know where you are.
Well, I'm at BenDunnComics.com. I'm also on Facebook and all the various sundry social media sites.
Awesome. It's another good day talking about comics and fun. We will see you guys next time. Thank you.